really, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart for a whole lot of different reasons. Number one, I think it's just such a fascinating space, and for the rest of for the rest of my working career as well as the rest of my life, it's going to be a space that's constantly evolving. And one of the things about cybersecurity that I find fascinating is just how clever different actors are in this space, both malevolent actors as well as protective actors. We are going to be covering an awful lot of information during this talk. Rather than you worrying about trying to write things down, I will provide a copy of all of these slides to you so that you'll have it for reference whenever you are in the whenever it's the right time for you to start implementing any of the recommendations that I make. I would much rather you actually just have a chance to sit back and listen, and any questions that you have, please, I'd suppose, type in the chat and we'll go through them at the end. And so I look forward to it. We're going to cover a lot of different areas related to both personal and professional cybersecurity. I'll run into it. I'll just jump into it. So a lot of the information that I am going to be covering is from a book that I put out in 2021. The 2022 edition is actually now available, called, hey, Practical Cybersecurity for Extremely Busy People. I also draw on information from another book that I wrote this year, called Nowhere to Hide, regarding open source intelligence gathering, which is another whole fascinating space, which I could talk about hours for if anybody is ever interested, about the vast amount of information that is available on each and every one of us online, and how that information can be used to our benefit or to our detriment. One last thing, over the course of the last couple of years, as cybersecurity has become increasingly pressing for individuals as well as companies, my biggest activity really has been to become a consulting CISO, helping companies reduce risk. And just from a constant intellectual challenge standpoint, I find that fascinating because there's so many different ways threat actors are trying to approach companies. We're going to cover a couple of healthy habits, essentially, which I believe everybody, if there's nothing else you do out of this entire talk, do at least the first couple of slides of what I'm suggesting. You'll make me feel so much better for you. One of the things that's most intimidating about cybersecurity is people think, okay, I'm extremely vulnerable today, I must be bulletproof by tomorrow. And realistically, just like anything else, getting healthy, getting smarter, things like that, it takes time and it's evolutionary. But there are, and so the way I recommend people look at their entire online life, which is vast and which we are all, pulled into, is start taking small steps consistently, and over time you can dramatically improve just your overall positioning and your overall safety. So if you are not already using a password keeper, I highly recommend that you do. The good news is there are any number of free ones available, whether it's through your Google Chrome or Internet Explorer, or you can certainly pay for paid services. I actually tend to use LastPass, in part because before there were free ones, there were paid ones, and I've been using this for the past several years. The whole point about a password keeper is the weakest link in any cybersecurity issue is the human factor. Number one, I have a terrible memory. So if you ask me to remember 3 passwords, I'm not going to remember 2 of those. A password keeper allows you to create randomly generated passwords, which are essentially impossible to remember. And the password keepers can autofill any logins that you're able to use. I tend to use the very longest amount of characters that may be allowed on any particular website. Typically, it runs up to 64 characters because just from a pure mathematical standpoint, it makes it that much harder for an attacker to try to brute force break your passwords. You know, I have literally seen passwords broken in nanoseconds using off-the-shelf software that people are able to use. So I highly recommend getting a password keeper. I actually upgraded my LastPass to include like the quote unquote family plan. So my wife and 4 kids can also keep all of their things organized. Super duper. If there's one thing that you do, if you are not already doing it, I highly recommend this be the one thing you do. The other thing I've had to do, which is kind of annoying, is go back and change the passwords on all of my earlier accounts where I did use the same password repeatedly. And that is a very slow, tedious process. But over time, I'll finally get that done, and it'll be worth the effort. The other thing I strongly recommend people take a look at is this website called Have I Been Pwned, Pwned, which is the way the cool kids spell owned. And essentially, this is a massive database going back several years, recording all of the known data breaches that have occurred with companies where user information has been stolen. All that you have to do is type in your email, and it will tell you whether or not your email has been recognized in any computer breaches. If they have been, then the thing that you should do is go and change your password for those, for whatever accounts show up. The reason being, if it is recorded here, if it's been collected on this website, essentially that database, which includes your email, has been available for sale on the dark web. So for instance, I put in one of my emails. I have literally about 9 working emails that I use for different things. And these are actually for 2 different emails that I had. And Have I Been Pwned informed me that my email was recognized in data breaches on these different accounts. So I had to go in. One was LinkedIn. I went into LinkedIn and I changed my password using my password keeper, making a ridiculously long password that I don't need to remember. And I went down the list and changed every one. I highly recommend everybody look at this because it's almost guaranteed that your email is going to be in one of the data breaches that have occurred over the years. Companies are supposed to inform you when this happens, but chances are that email gets sent to your junk folder and you'll never see it. And even if you got it, you wouldn't remember to do anything with it. Because who reads corporate junk mail? Again, the human factor is the weakest link in any cybersecurity, actually in any kind of personal protection. The human factor is always the weakest link. So although there are tools that are out there that you can buy, either there are tools that are free, there are tools that you can buy. If you don't apply them consistently and with a certain level of diligence, it's not necessarily going to do much for you. So like trying to get physically healthy, trying to have a healthy online life also requires being conscientious of it and consistency in an ideal world. We're going to cover, we're going to talk about looking at things that can directly impact your career, and then we'll go into other things that can directly impact your personal life that I think are really important. One of the biggest threats to the corporate world is phishing, Phishing, where essentially people are sent spam emails with the hopes that somebody will click a malicious link, which would then be able to download either malware or ransomware or something else onto a person's computer. There are different levels of sophistication that people do use for these things. Like we've all gotten the, oh, your PayPal account has been suspended, click on this link to fix. A lot of things that are immediately easy to identify, a lot of things that are already caught in spam. However, there are certainly more targeted attacks that people are using to try to connect with people. So for example, this is actually an email exchange that I received from one of my clients. This was about a year ago. And the email looked as though it came from my client, and the message was very brief. Are you working today? My client actually happens to be extremely brief, so if I got an email that just said you working today, I wouldn't think much of it. It does sound like their tone and tenor. I replied, yes, I am. How's it going? And then I got a terse reply back. I need your help with something ASAP. So I wrote back, sure, what do you need? And then the response was, I need you to buy 10 $100 gift cards and email me the numbers right away. So when I received that, I realized, what the hell? You know, this is spam. I took a closer look. It was sent directly to my correct email address. It was sent by basically a spoofed email that was meant to look like this particular CEO. The way they found our connection was they just simply went down the company website. They found the CEO's name. It's easy enough to find out what somebody's email address is. And my name was related to a finance function at that company. And so CEO, they found somebody in finance, and they spent what, 3 minutes trying to get $1,000 in gift cards. And now, while you think, okay, well, this is so obvious, it's not going to happen, or people, my staff will be able to capture that. Interestingly enough, I was looking I live in Princeton, New Jersey, in our local newspaper from about a year ago. This was in the police blotter, which said on December 23rd, somebody reported being deceived into sending $1,800 worth of gift cards to someone pretending to be their boss. The scam was discovered after the activation numbers were sent to the suspect. So spear phishing can occur, at any different level, because essentially the cost of trying to do business like this for a scammer is free. It's literally cutting and pasting into or it's actually initially it's probably a bot that is just simply sending out emails to a massive database of corporate emails. But the challenge for companies is that it can happen at any level. Typically people think, oh, well, that was probably a lower level employee who might have done something, and yes, whatever, my staff might be sloppy, or people may not pay attention. But then going up the food chain in the phishing scheme, there's phishing, which is mass mailing. There is spear phishing, which is the example I just gave you, where somebody specifically targeted me and was pretending to be someone I knew. And then there is what is called whaling, which is basically going after bigger fish. So 3 examples of whaling attacks that could happen to anybody, but these were well publicized, but as a business owner, business person, you certainly should be aware of. For example, at Seagate Corporation, Human Resources received a fake email from somebody pretending to be their CEO, asking for their W-2 tax forms. And so somebody in Human Resources, trying to be dutiful and responsive, because they were asked, had sent data for over 10,000 employees to the CEO. So if you provide names, social security numbers, their income, and their home addresses, imagine what a malicious actor can do with that. Either if they want to use it themselves to open up credit cards in your name, or whatever else it might be, or just simply sell that list repeatedly on the dark web. Similarly, at the company Snapchat, the Human Resources received a request from the CEO for employee payroll information, and they dutifully fulfilled it. And then interesting, an airplane manufacturer in Australia named FACC, the CEO was fired after he inadvertently wired $56 million to fraudsters. And the company claimed that he severely violated his duties. He sent it in good faith, presumably he sent it in good faith, thinking it was to a vendor for something or other. But once that money is gone, it is gone. So what can you do when there are so many people, so many organizations that are out there that are just simply waiting to try to take advantage of you? One of the most important things any company should do, regardless of your size, even if you're just a sole person, actually implementing standard operating procedures and safety valves or fail-safes in your in how you process information, and particularly in how you process sensitive information, as well as financial information and money, basically. Implement safety valves and fail safes to ensure checks and balances. Similarly, there should also be documented procedures for how senior executives can and can't perform sensitive functions. So, for example, a few years ago, I was CEO of a manufacturing company in New Jersey. Probably about 40 employees, not the biggest, not the smallest. Quite a lot of fun, quite frankly. But as CEO for for a relatively smaller company, one of the things that I actually informed my CFO about was I told him I did not want access to our QuickBooks. Number one, because at the time I didn't really know how to use QuickBooks, and so therefore I was afraid if I got into it, I might mess something up. But secondly, I also knew there was nothing I needed to do in QuickBooks for this company. That's why I had a CFO and a finance department. I did not need access for ego or anything else, and so in your organization, similarly, there should be what's called least privilege. What is the least privilege somebody requires to be able to do their job? And that's one way to try to put some safeguards into your functioning and into your staffing. And the third point, I think, which is extremely important, is require sign-offs and secondary authorization where appropriate, such as changing vendor information or vendor account information. So at one of my clients, I was able to help them avoid this situation where and a person in finance who is relatively new and in a relatively junior position was receiving emails from somebody purporting to be a vendor, initially just saying, "Hey, how are you doing? Happy Friday," things of that nature, just starting that dialogue chain back and forth of not a whole lot of meaningful information. But then eventually they said, "Oh, by the way, we're going through an audit. We need to change accounts for the next payment. Can you send it to this account?" And the reason why that was found was actually not because that company had safeguards in place yet. The staffing person, the staff member asked, how do I change a vendor's account number? And fortunately, the person she asked said, "Why do you want to do that?" "Oh, because they asked me to send it to this account instead." And it's like, okay, guess what? Immediately we're drafting standard operating procedures, starting from the most vulnerable going down to the least vulnerable of your issues. And again, it's the human factor. The person was being entirely responsible in what she thought her role was supposed to be. She just didn't understand what the risks were, and it also was not documented at their company. So for all of us who have an online life, which is everybody here, one of the things that I also recommend, just to be able to cut the noise out of your life, is trying to put in safeguards and self-policing elements in what you do on a regular basis. So, for example, on LinkedIn, I probably get anywhere from 5 to 15, whatever friend requests every week or something of that nature. And quite frankly, at the moment, I have over 4,000 LinkedIn connections. I don't know anybody. But when I was CEO of that company, I decided I would accept anybody's invitation that wanted to reach out to me, because it was a polite thing to do. But then as it continued to get larger and larger, I couldn't tell who was a real person and who was a robot. So one of the things that I did was I started I put emojis as a screening mechanism into my LinkedIn profile. And using my telephone, I just got into LinkedIn. I edited my profile and I stuck a couple of emojis at the front and back of my, whatever it's called, my headline. I put a globe and another globe because I thought it made me seem international. And the impact of this was immediate and incredibly helpful. So what this does, so whatever, globe, Daniel, Farber Huang, blah blah blah. Here are all my platitudes. When I started receiving emails then and invitations, I started receiving ones that started including, "Hey, Globe, Daniel, I love to network. Hey, Globe, Daniel, whatever." And so clearly these were just these were bots that were just screening through LinkedIn and sending their spam emails out. So anytime I get an invite or a connection request with the Globe, I know to ignore it, because I know that, you know, it just helps cut out some of the noise. So ideally, if it saves me 30 seconds a day, that's 2.5 minutes a week. That's 10 minutes a month. That's 120 minutes a year. That's 2 hours a year of time that I could use on something that's actually useful, instead of just filtering through social media junk. And the reason why that's increasingly important is that it is so difficult to be able to tell who is actually a real person online nowadays, when you get these random invitations. So for instance, none of these people on this page exist. And what I mean by that is each of these faces was generated using AI, artificial intelligence. And they're, quite frankly, unless you really knew how to pick these images apart, and there are only a few very scant clues that may be able to help you identify them, there's no way you would know that these are not real people. People have fallen in love with a lot less online, let's put it that way. And so as you look for things, just anytime you're on the internet, you do need to be increasingly aware about what's real and what's not, who wants things from you and who doesn't. And you can go to this website, this person does not exist, and see an endless stream of AI generated faces, all of which you would not know are not real people. Similarly, one of the things to be aware of, anybody who's trying to take advantage of you with effort and intention, anybody who might be interested in finding out more about you individually online, has an enormous number of open source intelligence gathering tools available for them. They are the kind of tools that online investigators may use for law enforcement or research. But there are also tools that threat actors can use to try to target you and make your life really, really difficult. So for instance, we're all guilty of this, using the same username for all of the different accounts that we have. I'm absolutely sure, we have all done that. I've done that. And that was before anybody knew that you shouldn't do that. But there's a reason why you shouldn't do that anymore, and it's because the tools have gotten more sophisticated to be able to track people and gather information on them. So, for instance, this website namecheck.com, their pitch is, hey, do you want to open up an account on a website? We'll tell you if that username is available. And so here's a sampling of all the different, kind of major cast of major characters that they search to see whether a username is available. Everything from Facebook all the way down to Quora and Telegram at the bottom. What you do is you put in a username and it'll just tell you whether or not it's available. And so I put a username, and these were the results that they provided literally within seconds. Any of the accounts where they are blacked out means that username has already been taken. Anything that's green means it has not. If somebody were looking to make your life difficult, create mischief, bother you, harass you, troll you, with a tool like this, now they could easily see where you do have existing accounts, and then start gathering information from you or harassing you on these different platforms. And just so with one email, like literally just eyeballing this, there are about 25, 30 accounts that have immediately been identified as belonging to that particular individual. So when it comes to doing things online and interacting with people that you don't know online, number one, trust your gut. I have heard time and time again from people who have said, I didn't think I thought it sounded strange, but I did it anyway. Use common sense. And thirdly, and most importantly, do not get emotional when you are dealing with scammers. Scammers rely on the human factor probably more than any other aspect of anything that they can do to take your stuff, whether it's your personal information, whether it's your finances, whether it's your account information, whatever. I know personally, a good friend of mine actually got caught up in not a short con and not a long con, but basically a con that would take about a month for scammers to empty all of her investment and bank accounts. And she actually was at the point where she had withdrawn all of the money from her bank, from her investment accounts. She had liquidated her stock accounts and was about to send it to these scammers that were impersonating foreign law enforcement officials. And the reason why she was going to do that was because they were able to, basically they gathered enough information about her before before pulling her into their con, that she believed she was dealing with legitimate law enforcement people who were putting demands upon her to prevent her, and if she complied, she would not be arrested. So the only reason why she was able to get out of that situation was because she actually had she finally shared with a close friend, a mutual close friend of ours, that she was in this horrible situation that she was working to get out of. And she literally could not see, the absurdity of her situation because she was so deeply tied into it. So anytime that you are in a situation, where let's put it this way, anytime your world comes crashing down, speak to somebody you trust and get support, because we all need it, and scammers look to exploit that. Okay, so now I've told you how horrible the world is. Now let's talk about what you can do to make it better for both yourself, people that you know, whether it's family or your coworkers. Several things actually, that I strongly recommend you do. These are things that I do. They have made my life dramatic in different ways. They've made my life meaningfully better, if not dramatically better. Number one, we are tied to our cell phones, in ways that we don't even recognize. And I believe it is increasingly important to be able to separate what's truly personal and important to us from everything else. So, just think about your cell phone number, which you have put in the bottom of your emails and you use for getting, your free turkey at ShopRite at Thanksgiving on your loyalty rewards and everything else. And it's also the number that your core family and friends call if they are ever in a bind. Like, we need to separate our private life from our public persona. One of the best ways we can start doing that is by actually having two cell phone numbers. Nobody wants to buy two cell phones. I don't want to buy two cell phones because why should I give Verizon more money? But you can get a free or inexpensive burner number that you can use for kind of your public persona. So personally, I use Google Voice. Number one, because it's free. Number two, because Google Voice gave me a new phone number, and I just use the Google Voice app on my cell phone. So from my phone, I can send or receive, voicemails, texts, and everything else from two different numbers, and I get to choose which one I want to use. Incredibly helpful. I'm starting to migrate my public life onto my Google Voice number, and that includes work. If people want to get me that badly, but I'm trying to make it so that only my family and my key friends have my true personal phone number. Everything else can be my burner number. Because it's important to recognize what is truly important and what is noise. And so I'm really trying to separate the two in my life, just so that I can focus on what's important. And also with the burner number, in the event somebody ever starts trolling you or harassing you, and that's the number that they have, you can always disconnect it without hurting your life that much. There are also paid apps, which I haven't tried, just mostly because Google Voice actually worked out so well for me. It is free. get to voice.google.com and get yours and download the app. I use it for I use it for voicemails and I'm sorry, I use it for phone calls and texting to non-key relationships. Okay, this page, there's a whole lot of stuff that I really want you to be aware of. I will send this to you. You don't need to write it down. But like I was saying, along with my phone numbers, we really, every single one of us should start thinking about our public versus private personas. Our public personas are what we put on Facebook, what we put on LinkedIn. It's okay, however we want to present ourselves to the outside world. And then our private ones are the things that actually matter to us. I recommend anytime you have any kind of social media, any social media platform that you are on, I recommend you have two separate accounts. One is a personal account and the other is a public facing account. So for instance, on Facebook, I have two of them. I have my personal that has 25 contacts, and I have my public one that has probably about 5,000 contacts. Importantly, I do not allow my personal people to be on my public account so that I don't cross-contaminate or cross-germinate, whatever you call it, cross-fertilize my users in case anybody on my public account ever tries to troll me. They can't I'm just trying to make it more difficult for them to find my friends and family. Because trolls, once they start trolling you, they will easily start harassing people that are, that are connected to you just to try to make your life less pleasant. On your private account, importantly, make your profile photo impersonal. On your private account, to truly make it private, I highly recommend, making it as obscure as possible. Use a non-personal image and username. Very big is always a good one, I think. You'll still be able to find your friends. You can always tell them what your username is, and don't use your real name, basically. Make one up. But do whatever you can to make it harder for strangers to track you down. Also, in your personal and public accounts, decide if it's really necessary to publicize your job, what city you're in, where you went to school. What you have to ask, what is the value beyond personal ego of sharing information? Also importantly, don't use your real birthday unless it's actually for something important. There's actually nothing that requires you to use your real birthday on anything that's not official, such as, IRS documents or medical records or academic records. But, does the grocery store really need to know when your birthday is? Does, Dairy Queen really need to know your true birthday to give you a free sundae? No. I highly recommend, on anything that's not key, use another memorable date for anything else. I'm kind of prone to February 29 because arguably some accounts won't bother you except once every 4 years. But you can choose any date that you want. But really do think about, what is the value of anybody knowing your true self? Sometimes there is value there, but so much of the time there is not. Similarly, don't use your real information on security questions. So for instance, a few years ago, Paris Hilton, the Hilton Hotels heiress, had some of her personal accounts hacked because the question was, what's your mother's maiden name? Hey, Google search. That was not hard to find. So instead of giving your mother's maiden name, name her favorite snack, name her pet's name, or something of that nature. There's absolutely no reason why your security questions actually have to be accurate, in part because they're just not that hard to find sometimes. What was a street that you grew up in? With enough time and attention, somebody could probably find that out. Actually, with public record searches, somebody could find that out. So do think about that. Similarly, I highly recommend disabling location sharing, unless it actually is for something that's important. If somebody truly needs to know where you are, they are going to ask you. But think twice about posting your location by checking into a restaurant or other locations, because again, ask yourself, what's the true value of sharing that kind of information? And then two other things that I'm a huge proponent of. Google Street View is an incredible tool for doing open source intelligence gathering. Investigators and trolls alike use it constantly. You actually own Google. If you are a homeowner, you have the ability to ask Google to blur your house from their Street View images. And it's something that takes probably about a month, maybe a little bit longer for Google to get to. But if you do it in advance, if you ever are the subject of somebody who wants to try to harass you, or somebody who wants to just simply rob your street, being able to blur your home is just protects your information. It protects your family. And again, what's the value of somebody actually needing to know that? The only possible downside, if there is one, is I guess Google owns Zillow, or Zillow uses Google Street Photos. And Zillow, if somebody wants to look at your house on Zillow, it's going to be blurred. I don't know if that's a big concern for people. Personally, I had my house blurred because as an open source investigator on projects that I've worked on, one of the first things that I have done is go to Google Street View and try to spec out a place to understand what the situation, just to understand what's there. It's incredibly valuable information in the wrong hands. And then finally, and this is going to be a little, possibly controversial, or some people may disagree with this, but I highly recommend do not post your children online. Do not post your grandchildren online. Just because at the end of the day, in my opinion, I believe the way the internet is moving, it's becoming just so much more fraught with unpleasantness and cruelty, and both on an individual basis as well as from a corporate standpoint. Algorithms searching for information on us and algorithms manipulating the information that gets directed to us are vast, vast and extremely disturbing on multiple levels. And personally, I have never posted a single photo of any of my children online, in part because I, want it to be their decision if they want to be online. And secondly, I just never saw any true benefit from it. Again, the people who know me and know my family and know my kids, they know us already. They don't need, I don't need to, if I need to connect with them through Facebook to tell them what I'm doing, then I need to do a better job keeping in touch with people that are important to me. The rest of the world, I don't want them to know. Okay, and again, one thing to keep in mind as well, and this certainly has cost enough people their jobs and has caused a lot of heartbreak and frustration over time in a lot of different ways. If you have an opinion that you're really emotional about, take a long pause and choose your words thoughtfully before hitting send, because once it is out there, it truly is out there forever. And if you don't believe me, go to allmytweets.net and you can grab the last 3,200 tweets from any user account on Twitter. I was made aware of this actually during my journalism, when I was going for my journalism degree, and we were looking at how do you conduct online research. Anytime there's somebody who does something controversial in the news, I guarantee you, journalists somewhere or other, some journalists or researchers are jumping onto sites like All My Tweets and grabbing information before it's deleted from people. And All My Tweets, Twitter, I believe, stores 3,200 tweets on any user, and this can grab all of them. That's an awful lot of information that can go back to years. So keep in mind, just for yourself, be extremely conscientious of anything that you post. We live in very emotional times, sometimes, all the time. I don't know how your take on it is, and so be conscientious whether or not you want to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Similarly, on Facebook and other platforms, there are many other things that can also grab all of that information. So this is online sexual harassment is an area that really pisses me off for any number of different reasons. I believe every single person has every right to take any picture or video of themselves as they so choose. And people have the right to do whatever they want with consent. What people do in their private lives is their decision, and they have every right to do it. That being said, the world is an ugly place out there. So if you are going to create any content that you would not want to be shared, there are steps that you can take to be able to just protect yourself better. For example, I highly recommend keeping sensitive photos and videos, and you can even keep your credit card information here, in an online vault. These things may not be 100% truly bulletproof to sophisticated hackers, but they certainly offer meaningful levels of protection to, above and beyond just simply having photos in your Google Photos or stored on your phone. It's more than easy enough to be able to break into people's telephones, as we've seen time and time again from multiple approaches. A couple of them that I think are particularly interesting are Cover Me and Keep Safe, as two things that you can have free versions or you can get premium paid versions, where again, literally just separating and putting layers of protection on information that is valuable to you that you do not want to share with the rest of the world. I am a huge proponent of. It's also very, very easy for threats from the online world to spill over into the physical world. We've seen that time and time again, happening to journalists, happening to public-facing people, celebrities, politicians, whatever. But certainly it also happens to regular people very often, whether or not, and those attacks can come from anywhere. Sometimes people are caught up in messy divorces or messy breakups, or sometimes the world's just a horrible place to people who are outspoken, outspoken for good things like public advocates and things of that nature. And so it is something that people should be aware of. So for example, I do a lot of humanitarian advocacy. For the last several years, I've been very, very heavily involved in raising awareness of the global refugee crisis. I've traveled around the world documenting refugee camps, and then back here in the United States, I publish our findings, our interviews, our photographs of inhumane living conditions around the world. It's something that's very important to me and to my wife, who's my documentary photo partner. A lot of the times, when we publish articles or publish reports, it's kind of appalling how much hate mail or the kind of hateful comments that can come back to us for sharing information. We're not trying to tell people what to think. We're trying to just provide information, hopefully, so people can form their own informed opinions and if we can add to the conversation on that particular issue, hopefully we've done something constructive. But it's the internet. So regardless of what we put out, we've kind of gotten used to getting some certain level of vitriolic responses back. There are any number of, we've all heard about situations where those have gone to extremes. And so this is something that can happen to any person for any reason, and we should all be aware of it. So one of the biggest threats out there, in part because it's cheap, easy, and free for anyone to do if they wanted to, is doxing, D-O-X-I-N-G, which is short for dropping dox. And basically, doxing somebody is when you publish sensitive personal information online, including their home address, their email, their phone number, their social security number, their photos, or anything else, to try to harass, intimidate, extort, stalk, or steal the identity of a target. So and this may never happen to you, but it very likely could happen to somebody that you know. So being aware of this is, I believe, really valuable, in part because of the people that you can help by being aware of it. Again, when somebody's caught up in this, they are going to be way too emotional, typically, to be able to think straight and react accordingly. This is where you can help people in a meaningful way. So if you or someone you know has been subjected to doxing, immediately report the dox to the platform on which it appears, and assess the threat level to your safety. Things like calling, uh, there are things that people may do like swatting, where they call the police and claim that there's a domestic disturbance at your home or a gun threat at your home, to try to get the police to break down your door and harass you and arrest you. There are situations like that that have gone horribly wrong, where people have literally been killed, as a ripple effect of doxing. Again, sadly, the internet, while it's great for puppy videos and things like that, is also horrible, in so many other ways. So we need to be aware of it. If you believe the email could fall into the hands of someone intent on harming you, consider informing your local law enforcement immediately as well. So if you or somebody you know is being harassed online, there are some immediate steps to take that I highly recommend. So if you are being harassed online at at a level that makes you feel personally unsafe, or you think somebody else is unsafe, either online or physically unsafe, report the threat to law enforcement. So two things: law enforcement may not be able to actually do anything about it. However, being able to have an official record that you reported it can be really valuable down the line, as you continue to address it. Consider your mental health. Seek support from peers or counseling early on. One of the things that trolls do is they want to try to make people feel isolated and alone, and that nobody in the world can help them, because it gives the trolls and the abusers power. Take that power away from them. Seek support from peers and counseling. Number 3, do not read the trolls' comments, because they are specifically written to try to hurt you at some level. Instead, have a trusted friend or colleague read them for you, and have that person make you aware of what you need to know, because so much of this you don't actually need to know. It's noise and it's malicious. Your trusted contact, your trusted friend, can be a much more objective filter, and they can help buffer you from the emotional turmoil and fear that trolls hope to inflict upon you. Number 4, document everything. Have somebody take screenshots of the abusive language, anything else that may be directed at you, phone calls or things of that nature. Document and record and log everything, because that could become an important evidence as a case builds. Also, just simply block or mute your abusers. There are two different things. If you block somebody online, they will very likely be informed that you have blocked them, which in turn may make them more determined to try to make your life difficult. If you mute an abuser, they are not necessarily told. They're probably not told, actually, that you have muted them. So they can keep sending you whatever crap they want, but it doesn't get to you. Again, keeping the control in your hands. Depending on the situation, you should consider making your family and close friends aware of the situation, and ask them to be cautious about the information that they share online about themselves as well as you. Depending on the situation, if necessary, inform your employer that you are being harassed online, if you fear that those people will try to contact your company or harm you in some way, either online or actually at your company. And then there are some other things. If you continue to post online, make your post private so that only your friends and family can see. Make sure your social media and your email logins are secure. After you get off of this call, everybody get on your Facebook and change your logins for something horrible and long. It's just a good thing to do. Turn notifications off at night so you can have a mental break. There's no reason why you have to be tormented by your phone constantly ringing. If you're getting, why be informed that you've gotten a mean message? And be aware that a lot of online harassment, sadly, people do for sport. You know, they may either do it for sport or they may do it for compensation, and it doesn't even need to be monetary compensation. So a lot of the abuse that may be directed towards you may not actually be personal. You could just simply be another job. And then finally, one of the things I also recommend is set up Google alerts for your name and spelling variations of your name, just to see if there is any information about you that is being made public. Google searches will not show you information that may show up in social media postings or comments or chats, but it's still a useful thing to have another set of eyes keeping an eye out for you. Okay, and I'm conscientious of the time, so I'm going to run through a couple of things real quickly that I do want to make us also aware of. When we are offline, you'll have my email in this presentation. If you want to talk about anything offline, I'm very happy to do it. I really, really think it's important for people to be able to be aware, and people have their own individual questions, so feel free to reach out to me, okay? So now, the part of the reason why I was saying don't post pictures of your kids or post your kids is because a selfie is worth a million words. So just for instance, if you can all see this, this is a stock photo. This is not, this is a stock photo. I decided to use stock photos for these examples. What can you determine about where this photo was taken? I'll give you all just a few seconds to take a closer look and try to draw your conclusions. So if you were looking at this from the eyes of a troll trying to make somebody's life difficult, and that this individual posted this picture, and you were trying to gather information, what could you infer? Okay, here's what my immediate observations are. Looking at the reflection on the car, she appears to be, well, from the photo, she appears to be on the roof deck of a parking structure. And next to the building in the reflection. Looking at the reflection, the building facade appears to be a lighter color on the lower portion and darker on the upper portion. Or it might be two buildings, one's light and one's dark. The taller one has more windows. And you can also see distinct patterns and relative sizes of different parts of the building or buildings. So if you knew which city or town that person frequents or lives in, you could use the process of elimination. Simply searching for parking garages on Google Maps and then looking at locations using Street View and Google Earth to find the reflection would help narrow down the possibilities. Again, those are Google Maps, Google Earth are two incredibly powerful tools that can be used for researching individuals, researching locations. So similarly, what can you determine about where this photo was taken? And again, this is a stock photo. The reason I decided to use stock photos actually was because when I was drawing up this example, I actually started by using a screenshot from somebody who posted a short video on Twitter. It was actually of a talk show host during COVID, where they shot the video from their apartment, and I was actually analyzing their picture to try to say, okay, if you wanted to figure out where this person lived, what could you figure out? There was so much information in that image, and incidentally, you'll notice my background is an exciting, fascinating plain white wall, and that's done by design, not done by default. But as I was drawing up my list of observations on that talk show host's apartment, I actually realized I can't post this because people can easily find this once I share this information, knowing the city that the person lived in. So this is a stock photo. What can you determine about where this photo is taken? And I'm showing this to you in the context of, think about the photos that you may be posting about yourself. What can that tell people? Okay. The individual's building is painted a dark exterior color, and from the exterior wall, it appears to have wood siding. The balcony has a short wall, approximately 3 feet high, and a metal safety railing above it. The door and window to the balcony appear to have relatively large panes of glass, giving them a distinctive pattern that may be easy to identify from the street. There appear to be tall trees in front of the balcony. And not too far away, about 500 to 1,000 feet maybe, is a tall building that looks to be at least 10 stories tall, likely taller. It is very wide with a sloped roof. And from the look of it, it might be a hotel or possibly an apartment building. And then searching online based on the above information and other breadcrumbs collected on the target from other photos could yield the location very directly. And then if that is if that is a hotel, let's say, or even an apartment building, obtaining access to the building across the way can enable a stalker to identify the wood furniture and metal barbecue to determine the exact apartment number. So, there is an incredible amount of information that is available if we look. Okay, these are photos that I pulled off of Facebook. These are not people that I knew. I just put a particular keyword into Facebook search. And as you look at this, you probably notice that there's one massive security flaw that is exhibited in every single one of these photos. And again, when I say the human factor is the weakest link in cybersecurity, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. And I think the keyword that I put might have been new home. And so, I have friends who have actually posted this kind of picture. We just bought our new home, look at it. And so if you type new home and the city where you live, think about the information that you can find here. So number one, one of the things about social media platforms and our cameras is we take very high resolution images of stuff. If somebody actually wanted to duplicate any of these keys on either by getting a key blank, which you can literally go to Home Depot and buy key blanks. You don't even have to get them cut, and a file. All you have to do is print out one of these photos life size, meaning measure the key, measure the size of an actual key, resize the photo to that actual key size, and then you can duplicate any of these house keys to the front door of these new homes. What happens? And even if new homes, old homes, whatever it might be, that's incredible information that ordinarily would not be available, but people are literally offering you the keys to the kingdom because they had to do a selfie of their new home. It's wonderful people are able to get new homes, but there are any number of different ways to be able to try to express that. Don't ever do this, please. And sadly, there are thieves and trolls who look for this because people's schedules are also highly predictable. More house burglaries happen during broad daylight hours than at night, because at night people are at home sleeping. During broad daylight hours, at least before COVID, people were at work. And to give you one example, and this is a very, very unfortunate situation, very sad case. This is kind of cyber trolling come to life. In 2019, Japanese pop star Ena Matsuka was attacked and assaulted outside of her home in Japan by a crazed fan. And the man was able to identify her home address by analyzing a selfie the victim posted. The selfie, more specifically, the singer took what appeared to be a simple selfie photo outside with no blatant, obvious indications of her location. So she was against a blank, nondescript wall. But the stalker zoomed in on the reflection in her eyes, where he was able to find reflections of a building and a street sign. So and you can see in the upper right photo, there is a clear reflection of a building. And then in the lower right, there are other indications. And so he used social media to locate the victim's home. He went on to Google Maps, I believe he went on to Google Maps, found the location, and ultimately went to that location, found her apartment building, and waited for her to return. And he assaulted the victim. So the amount of information that you don't even realize that you are putting out there is tremendous. So how do you protect your privacy with everything that I'm throwing at you? First of all, you need to recognize what privacy actually means in today's world. Um, so, for example, Google, Google as an investigative tool, Google is fantastic. I when I do investigations, I use Google as my primary browser because they have so much information. Google watches and records everything that you do on their platforms. And one of the things that's scariest about this on a personal basis is um, we don't even know how many, the average person, even the person who focuses on this, doesn't even know how many quote unquote platforms Google has that they track you on. This is actually a sampling of it. I believe there are 54, there are 54 different categories of information that Google stores on each of us. That Google stores on each of us. So, like I said before, I have about 9 different email accounts. 6 of which are hosted on Google. They're either Gmail accounts or they are like Google, whatever you call it, Google corporate or Google enterprise accounts. But they store, they store every piece of information that you ever put through them. Incidentally, if you use Google or if you use Chrome in incognito mode, Google still tracks that information. All that incognito mode on your browser means is that whoever uses your computer isn't going to see what your search history was. So, be aware of that. So, okay, what does this mean? These are a bunch of icons, blah, 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 blah. What's it mean? It doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows how to interpret this. Like there's something that says, let me see, Google Pinpoint, files you've uploaded on Pinpoint. I don't even know what that is. However, you can actually ask Google to provide you all of the information that they have on you. They are required to do so if you ask. I asked for one of my accounts for kind of like my oldest Google email account, which I hadn't used up until I hadn't used very heavily until maybe the last 3 years, maybe 4 years. But I asked Google to send me like all of the information they had on my account. Google informed me that they had 1.3 terabytes of information on me as of December 2020. So as of last year, actually. That included my browsing habits. And when I say my browsing habits, my browsing history until the beginning of time, shopping habits, social media, photos, videos, emails, and who knows what other information. So should I be concerned that Google has 1.3 terabytes of information on me? Yes. Should every single one of you be concerned? Absolutely yes. So what does that mean? Okay, if a laptop computer has 1 gigabyte of disk space, and quite frankly, that's like a better laptop because a lot of laptops only have half a gigabyte as default. But if a laptop computer has 1 gigabyte of disk space, Google has this many laptops of data about my one email account. And so why do they have that information? They have that information because it's a commodity to them. They can use it to sell it to other people. Okay, I feel exposed. I don't know how you feel about this. And Google's not the only one. So there are a couple of things that you should be aware of to try to give yourself a little more anonymity when you are a little more privacy, a little more anonymity when you do browse. So there are 2 different things. There are browsers and there are search engines, okay? So for instance, this browser on the screen is Chrome. Internet Explorer is a browser, Firefox is a browser. The search engine is Google. I'm searching on Google for this information. So Google and Chrome, they capture everything. They make that's their whole business. They capture your information. There are more private browsers and search engines that you could consider using, like Safari. Safari is actually pretty good from Apple. Firefox or Brave or even Microsoft Edge has a little more, holds your privacy, with more respect than Google does. And then so for instance, I use Firefox, and on Firefox, I search using DuckDuckGo, which is a more secure search engine. You download You get on your Chrome browser, download Firefox onto your computer. And then from Firefox, you go to DuckDuckGo and set that as your default browser. And so when you are online, you do have much more anonymity and privacy than Google. If you ever wonder why, when you look for fuzzy cat paw slippers as a Google search, and then you start getting ads in Facebook for fuzzy cat paw slippers, that's how it all. That's you being a moneymaker. Similarly, email privacy is increasingly is something that we really all ought to be more. I believe everybody should be very conscientious about email privacy. The one recommendation I would make, without going into the big whys of it all, if you're concerned about email privacy, Protonmail offers a private, a free email that offers higher levels of privacy and encryption from prying eyes. A couple of things about Protonmail. I actually have the paid version, which I use for specific things, like as my most secure email on certain communications that I have and certain work that I do. Because Protonmail is based in Switzerland, it's not subject to most search warrants, things of that nature. Importantly, Protonmail does not scan your emails to push advertising like Gmail does. So if you write to somebody and say, "Gosh, I really would like a lemon iced tea right now," in your email, Google reads your emails is the bottom line, because there's money to be made from it. So I highly recommend getting a free Protonmail email account, and if you do want to have something that is actually private. And then while I showed you Google's 54 categories of what they store about you, all social media is equally invasive realistically. So this is what Facebook grabs about you. Facebook, keeps every single comment you've ever made on Facebook. They look at every message, they look at every page, your admin. This is all about money. They don't care about your feelings. They just want to make money off of you. So try not to let companies or interest groups treat you like a commodity. Improving your privacy settings on everything that you do, being conscientious about who's truly exploiting you and who's exploiting you less is a healthy thing to be aware of. If I can be of assistance to anybody offline, if you have questions, I'm always happy to share information. I think this is really important because it's only going to become more invasive as AI becomes a more regular part of our daily lives in ways that we don't know. And then, wait until things like quantum computing becomes a practical thing for us. The sooner we can start healthy habits, the better prepared we will be as all of these new developments come down the pipe. So down below is my Gmail address. Feel free to reach out to me. We would be very happy to answer any kind of questions that you all have. So thanks everybody for letting me share all of this information. I know it was a huge data dump, but that's what cybersecurity is. I tried to do it in as few words as possible, believe it or not. And you'll get copies of the slide deck afterwards. So I'm very happy to answer any kind of questions anybody might have. And I see there might be some in the chat.
Yeah. Do you have a recommendation for like Norton or for a protection for your computer?
Sure. So I did take a look at a bunch of them. I personally use Norton 360 because it had I like their real-time scanning of my stuff. Norton 360 also has a VPN, like lots of places have VPNs, but their VPN, their virtual private network, which also increases your privacy, works pretty well. And I kind of bought the for a relatively affordable price. I think the starting price is $40, and I think they up it to $100 the next year. You get 5 licenses to be able to have on your phones or your computers. So Norton 360 is actually my go-to. So Zoe, do you want me to run down the questions in the chat?
Sure. I wasn't sure if it seemed like a couple of them were answered. You did touch on DuckDuckGo, and then maybe into the password manager a little bit more.
Sure. So so the whole point about using a password manager is the theory is the safest password is one that you don't know. And so with password keepers, password keepers will remember different accounts that you have on whatever websites there are. So it'll store the the website name, it'll store your username, and it'll store your password. And the thing with password keepers is they have random password generators where typically you can choose, do you want it to be 8 characters long or 35 characters long? And it'll automatically create a password for you. You may need to do a little cut and pasting, when you update your passwords or create your passwords. But it will ask, do you want us to store this password for you? So next time you get onto that website and you have to log in, you click a button or two, or right click a button, and you can have your password keeper autofill your account information into that website. And so with password keepers, the theory is you only have to remember one password, which is the password for your password keeper. Ideally you'll put 2-factor authentication on it, so nobody can just steal your password, your one key to the kingdom password, without requiring 2-factor authentication. And that way you're able to just dramatically increase your security and not use the same password. One of the things that malicious actors plan on is that people have reused their passwords, because again, we're all guilty of doing that. I'm undoing that. I'm still undoing that for a couple hundred emails, a couple hundred accounts that I have.
I had a
Somebody,
question.
yes.
And this is every now and then I get an email coming from a reputable company that I enjoy doing business with, American Express, maybe Comcast, and it's the usual scam of fill out this survey, you'll get $50. Is there any proactive thing we can do as far as alerting the company that is getting abused by these emails? Like, do they care? I mean, if I sent this to Comcast, would they be appreciative, or would they just have to ignore it? And
I would think that they are probably aware of it already, just because there are services that are out there that companies can subscribe to kind of keep track of what traffic and chatter there is. So if it's quite frankly, if it's a company with revenue over $1 billion, I wouldn't bother. Secondly, I gotta say, you're about the only human being on earth I've ever heard who enjoys doing business with Comcast. So congratulations, Neil. That's impressive. I wouldn't tell Comcast on principle. Somebody asked, can you speak to the efficacy of DuckDuckGo? So sure. When you type something in, if you type used cars into Google, it's going to start feeding you advertisements, and it's going to start feeding you information about used cars, or it's going to alert people that are searching, used car companies, that, oh, this ISP or this email is searching for used cars, and anything that you use in Google, they are going to try to monetize. Because they read and they process your searches in that way. DuckDuckGo does not do any of that. They do not try to commercialize any of your information, and they don't save. They'll store your history if you ask them to, but they don't try to actually monetize it. So it gives you a tremendously higher level of privacy than the folks at Google. Protonmail is awesome. This has been terrific. Thank you for saying that, Jerry. LastPass for 2. I've used LastPass. LastPass is good. So I believe I hit all of the questions that are in the chat. I guess now that I've dumped all of this on you in 72 minutes. How do you all feel?
Well, it really is, for me, it's really spooky. There's just so much information being gathered, and we've always known that it's being gathered. But when you see it in raw terms, like what you were sharing, it really is spooky that that much is being collected, and we see it every day how it's being used to market to us. And as a marketer, I feel a little guilty.
If you really want to get scared, look closer into the Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook, where Facebook sold people's profile information and how it was horribly manipulated to try to sway people's opinions one way or another. So it's not just our shopping habits that are of value, it's our psychological profiles that are really valuable to people that are willing to pay for it, depending on what their agendas are. And so much of it is subtle and hidden that we don't, we're being manipulated without realizing that we're being manipulated, and that's the scariest part of it all to me. So.
Now, are there any social platforms that you would definitely recommend staying away from and not getting involved on?
I have a growing beef with Facebook from a philosophical standpoint. In terms of it's terribly sad. Facebook had the potential for being just generally used for good, but I feel, and this is me speaking personally, I feel that Facebook intentionally is allowing malicious things to occur because it is profitable for them. And so what I mean by that is, let's put it this way, if I were Mark Zuckerberg and I ran Facebook and I knew that and this has been proven, and I was made aware, or I realized that Facebook played a meaningful role in helping spread hate speech and being an echo chamber for hate in Myanmar, where Rohingya refugees were slaughtered because I allowed that to go unregulated, I would hate myself. But that's allowed to occur, and it continues to be allowed to occur. With whatever, okay, look, we're all going to with whatever bullshit platitude and excuses that they give. Oh yeah, we couldn't prevent it. Yes, you could. And so, so from a philosophical standpoint, I have a tremendous issue with that. So, am I willing to not do, whatever, post stuff on Facebook from about stuff in protest? Yeah. So it's things like that. So similarly, like the recent revelations about how Facebook and Instagram, intentionally target teenage, social media makes more money when they make people feel bad about themselves rather than when they make them feel when people feel good about themselves. So with the Facebook whistleblower, and I'll give huge props to her for going up against a massive behemoth like that, providing insight into the algorithms that they use, that harm teenage girls, there's Instagram has more engagement when teenage girls feel bad about themselves rather than when they feel good about themselves. So it's been recognized that they kind of target, they'll put whatever, they'll feed the streams and the reels and the photos into people's accounts that ultimately are help people feel bad about their bodies instead of feel good about their bodies and things of that nature. Because it increases engagement, so do the leaders of Facebook have the ability to actually change that? Yes, absolutely. They could have changed it immediately if they chose to, and they choose not to. So,
Daniel, we've got a question from Ben.
yes.
And I'm wondering for recommendations on effective ways to delete some of this online information.
So there are a few different ways, actually. One of the things that we are all kind of subject to / victim to are data brokers. So like if you've ever had an Intellius report run, or if you ever type somebody's name, if you ever Google somebody, chances are some of the top ads that you'll see on Google are, find out this person's home number, or find out their phone number, or find out their email, and all of that information is sold by data brokers. Which is a very large business. Even like the credit card companies, they sell our data to other companies. And I've actually tried to contact data brokers to say, take my information off of your site, do not make it available, which is in your right to be able to do. I believe the FCC regulates it, but it's incredibly time consuming, and it's, quite frankly, it's a massive pain in the ass to even track it down. So I've been using, I actually use a paid service called DeleteMe, DELETEME.com, which costs like $100-something a year per person. I got it for myself and my wife. Basically, I canceled my Spotify account and I used it for this instead, where they actually contact, they have a list of, I believe it's like 45 of the largest data brokers, and it takes a while for them to get through them, but they contacted them and said, okay, take off all of Daniel Farber Huang's information from your site. And they actually give me a quarterly report of the progress that they've made. It took about 6 months start to finish to get the vast majority of data brokers to delete my information. But I wasn't going to do it because I tried and it was a massive pain. And one of the good things about DeleteMe is they also kind of do like a health check every so often to see if I reappear on their sites, and they continue to have me taken off. So basically, I'm going to be paying them for years, but it's worth it for me just to not make my information immediately available. And then the best thing you can do to try to delete some of the information is go into your own social media accounts and delete anything that's not really important, and change, like I said, I'm not anonymous, whatever, can't say the word, make yourself as anonymous as possible. Decide what truly is important and what is not, that the public needs to know about you. Because at the end of the day, if, like they say, if you're not the customer, you're the product. And so, I think we should all make ourselves less the product. So go delete all of your tweets, unless there was something really, really clever. And same thing, Facebook videos. The only things I post on Facebook that I had posted on Facebook previously were related to my humanitarian advocacy work, because it was, it's out there, but I'm having my moral quandary with them now, as more and more, as it becomes more and more evident that they don't care about the individuals. If there's money to be made, and there's always money to be made. So, but on that note, the world is a beautiful place as long as you're willing to make it that way. So, hopefully I've been able to help share some things that you can use to keep yourself and your family and your friends safer. I think being conscientious is definitely the way to go, and it's an ongoing process. So I really appreciate you all taking the time to listen, and I hope it's been valuable for you.
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.